So, without further ado, let's get right into the training. And again, today's training is going to be on Microsoft Excel. Now, what I just did, and the reason you're seeing a blank screen, is because of the fact that I went to the end of a PowerPoint presentation that I started this with. What I'm going to do now, and what I try to do in all these training classes, is just give you little things to take away from it, things that aren't always necessarily related to the training, but things that might help you. Right now, I'm just trying to get away from this PowerPoint presentation, and I can end the slideshow, but I can also, on my keyboard, on the bottom left-hand side, there's a control key, CTRL, and just to the right of it, there is a key with the Windows logo on it. I'm going to press that key and this box popped up. It just sort of got me back to where I can get to things. Now what I've done is I've already opened up Microsoft Excel on my computer. Your computer should have an icon for Microsoft Excel someplace. A lot of times it can be listed in here, possibly down below. But if you don't know how to get to Excel, you can go to All Programs. When this pops up on the screen, I'm going to go over to Microsoft Office, go over to the right, and here is a desktop icon for Microsoft Excel 2003. If you didn't know this, if that's something you use all the time, by right-clicking on that little area, I can put a shortcut on my desktop. So if I come down to Send To, and then go Desktop, Create Shortcut, now what I've done is I've taken Microsoft Excel and put a shortcut on my desktop. Another thing is down on the bottom left there's a little icon here that's called Show Desktop. When I click on this, it in essence minimizes everything on my computer screen and takes me right back here to the desktop. So just a couple little things to help you just with some general computing. I've already opened up Microsoft Excel down at the bottom. I'm going to click on this and bring it up on the screen. And a couple things I just want to mention. When I teach Microsoft Excel, I make an assumption to a certain degree that you know certain things about software. For example, you're going to see up here there are a couple different toolbars up here. Actually, I have a couple that you most likely don't have. Something called Snagit, which for the time being I'm just going to close. But the two toolbars you most likely see on the top of Excel are these two toolbars right here. This one and then this one. This is the formatting toolbar down below, and this is the standard toolbar. I also have some options up top. If you've used Microsoft Word in the past, you're going to find that most of the things you see on the toolbar are very similar to Microsoft Word. When I teach Excel, I've typically taught my clients Word beforehand, and I go into this in a little more detail than I would in this class. Now, having said that, I've been more than happy to go into this if you'd like me to, but during the training today, I'll be touching on this information a little bit here and there. What I really want to draw your attention to is the middle of the screen. When you open up Microsoft Excel, what typically happens is you open up what is called a workbook. So you open up Microsoft Excel, and now what you have is a workbook that has opened, and typically what you see down below is three separate distinct worksheets. Because I've opened this and because I've customized or changed this a little bit, you're seeing a couple other little items down here, one called Tony's Stuff and one called Class Info. I want you to disregard those for a moment, and I want to draw your attention back to Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3. When you open up Microsoft Excel, it opens up as a workbook. Typically that workbook does not have a name up top. In this case, because I've opened what's called a template, it does have a name. But this will not have a name until you give it a name. And there really isn't a reason to name it unless you've started to do things with it. So when you open Excel, you have three worksheets within a workbook. Now, in this workbook, in this particular worksheet right here, we have columns, we have rows on the left-hand side. The rows are numbered, the columns are lettered, A, B, C, D, so forth. Now, if I click in this very first cell, you're going to notice above it there's a little what's called name box that tells you the actual cell you're in. I'm in cell A1. Again, if I click somewhere in the middle of the spreadsheet, it will again tell me I'm in cell G11. Also, I want to draw your attention here to where the G is and where the 11 is. Notice they're orange. If you have an older version of Microsoft Excel, there is a chance that on your version of Excel it isn't orange, it might just be an off color, like a gray, because there's many different versions of Microsoft Excel. The newest version out is Microsoft Excel 2007. Later in our training, hopefully we will do some training in Microsoft Excel 2007. Having said that, if you have Excel before this, for example Excel 2000, 99% of the things I'm going to go over with you today are exactly the same. There's some subtle differences, but not enough to even really worry about. So again, all these little items in here are cells, and if I just click around the screen, I can jump around as I see fit. Now, I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to click in cell D1. And what I want you to observe is on the left-hand side, you'll see it's numbered 1 down to approximately 31. There's a couple different ways that I can go down the screen. If I use the arrow keys on the right-hand side of my keyboard, the up and down arrow key, I can go up and down in Excel. Obviously, I can also just simply click in a cell. But what I'm going to show you next is I'm going to use the page down key. And the page down key on my keyboard will jump down, in essence, this distance from here down to the bottom to about 31. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to D1, and I want you to observe when I hit page down, it jumps down about 31 rows. If I hit page down again and again and again and keep holding it down as I'm talking, what you're going to see is the rows on the left-hand side just start flying by. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want you to see that as I hold this down and the rows fly by, this just keeps going down and down and down. We're down to about 12,000 rows already. When I stopped, I'm going to hold the page down key down again. I'm just going to go down a little bit more. Now, there are tons of rows. You are not going to run out of space. You will never run out of space. So I want you to know that it's very rare when you have to use multiple spreadsheets because you're running out of space. That's just not going to happen. For just a moment, I'm going to click in the middle of the spreadsheet and I'm going to type in my name. And again, my name is Tony. And I'm going to hit the Enter key just to sort of lock in my name. Now, the very first cell in Excel spreadsheet is cell A1. A is an apple, the number 1. A quick shortcut to get all the way back there is on my keyboard if I hold the Control key down. And if you think of A1 as the home area, I'm going to hold the Control key down and then on my keyboard hit the Home key, H-O-M-E. And I jumped all the way back to A1. Okay, so that's a great little shortcut to keep in mind. If you get in the middle of a spreadsheet and you're like, okay, where am I? I just got to get back to the beginning. Control Home is a great way to do that. Now, I'm going to come down just a little bit by clicking in the middle of the spreadsheet. This time, I want to illustrate the columns. Keep in mind we had the row numbers, but now the columns as I go to the right are A through Z. But when I get past Z, I want you to observe what happens. Right up here, instead of it being numbered, obviously there's only 26 letters, so what it does is it starts to double up the letters. Once we get past Z, the columns change to AA, AB, AC, and so forth. Then once we get past the A's, it will again double up by starting with B's, BA, BB, and so forth. I'm going to hold the right arrow key down so we go all the way over to the right because I want you to see how far we can go. And I'm going to tell you a little trick to remember this. Once we get over to the right, you're going to see the last column is column IV, as in Victor. The way you're going to remember that if you're ever on a game show and they say, okay, what's that last column in Microsoft Excel? Well, it's IV, and the way you're going to remember that is if you ever have to work on a spreadsheet that takes you all the way over to IV, that is most typically what you're going to need. They're going to take you to the hospital and give you an IV. Now, again, I want to get back to cell A1, so I'm going to hold the Control key down and hit Home to get back to cell A1. Okay, so I'm jumping around a little bit. There are approximately 65,000 rows going down, and approximately 280 columns going all the way over to the right hand side. 665,000 by 280. You've got tons of room to work with. And if you should, for whatever reason, want to go onto a second sheet, if you come down to the bottom and click on sheet 2, that is exactly the same as sheet 1. 280 rows across, 65,000 rows down. So you're not going to run out of space. I'm going to come back over and click on sheet 1, and I want to point out something to you. When I went down to the middle of the spreadsheet, I clicked in a cell and I typed in my name. Now, as you can imagine, when you're working with a lot of information, a lot of cells, a lot of space on your screen, sometimes you're going to lose things or not be able to find it. So what I did is in that particular cell, I typed in my name. I typed in Tony. So instead of me sitting here trying to find out where I put Tony, a little trick that I can use in Microsoft Office and also in different software as well, like Internet Explorer, is if I go up to the toolbar and I go to Edit, I want you to notice that there are a lot of options here. Well, the one I want to draw your attention to for the moment is Find. And when I've drawn your attention to that, I want to illustrate something by using this as a way to show you some of the things that make software difficult. To the left of the word Find is a set of binoculars. To the right of it is the keyboard shortcut for Find. So in other words, there's more than one way to get to the same thing. There's not a right way or a wrong way, but there's more than one way to get to the same piece of information. So when you're working in a spreadsheet, what you want to do is be able to find information. So in this case, I'm just going to click on Find, and a box is going to pop up. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to type in Tony and hit Enter. What I want you to observe is that Microsoft Excel jumped down to the cell that had my name in it. Now in this case, it's the only cell that has Tony in it. So we've jumped down to row 23,667, column G. Okay, so we jumped quite a ways. If Tony was in here multiple times, we could click on Find Next. If we wanted to take Tony and replace it with something else, for example, let's say we wanted to replace it with Anthony, we could click on the Replace tab, type in Anthony, and now what happens is we're going to have an option. Do we want to replace this one by clicking on Replace, or if Tony was in here 50 times, do we want to replace all of them? Be careful with this feature. I'm going to click on just Replace, and now it changed it to Anthony. If there were multiple in here, I could click Find Next to find my name, the next instance of it. I'm just going to click Close to get away from this, and again I'm going to hit Control and then Home to get back to cell A1. Another little tip I want to show you is because Tony is really at the end of the spreadsheet, it's at the furthest point in the spreadsheet, a keyboard trick that I could have used to get to my name, because I knew it was the furthest thing away, is I could have held the Control key down and hit End, E-N-D, and it would have jumped down to it. So it would take you to your furthest point in your Excel spreadsheet. So I just did Control End, E-N-D, and now I'm going to do Control Home again to go back to cell A1. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer? Okay, and I'll open it up for questions again later. Now, why do you want to use Excel? One of the things that I find is very common with Microsoft Excel is I will get phone calls about Microsoft Excel training, and a lot of times people will say, well, I want to be able to do this, 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 and this with Excel. A lot of times they want to keep things like financial information. You know, they might want to do their accounting in Excel. Well, one of the things I always tell people about Microsoft Excel, although you could set it up to do that, the amount of time it would take you to set everything up to work exactly the way you want it, a lot of times there are off-the-shelf programs that can do a better job. So when you're using Microsoft Excel, one of the questions you should always ask yourself before you get too involved in it, is there something that I can use that will do a better job? With the accounting example, there's a program that a lot of small businesses use called QuickBooks. So QuickBooks is usually what I recommend because it's designed for that. Also, sometimes people use Excel to do things like mailing list management or contact management. Can you do it? Yeah, absolutely. Would I recommend using it? No, not a chance. There's software such as Outlook or ACT or other kind of contact management systems. So one of the first things I want to point out is always make sure that Excel is really the tool that you need to be using. Excel is great for keeping track of information that is things you're going to use on a regular basis. You can do very complex financial calculations with it. So you really have to make yourself aware of whether or not it's the best program for what you're trying to do. Very key. Now, in this particular example, what I'm going to show you is I want to assume for a minute that we are a human resources department. And my job right now is to go in and track some employee information. So for example, up here in cell A1, I'm just going to type in the word name. And when I hit the right arrow key, I'm going to go over to cell B1, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to type in phone, for phone number obviously. I'm going to hit the right arrow key. I'm going to type in SS for social security number. Okay. I'm going to type in ROP for rate of pay. And next, I'm just going to type in zip, for example. Now, I'm going to come back to name, and I'm going to type in my name. I'm going to hit the enter key to go down to the next line. And I'm just typing in some fictional employee names. Now, I'm typing in Dave Howard, but now as I hit the enter key, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type in Tom Harris. And I want you to see what happens when I hit the letter T. Excel tries to anticipate what I'm typing by looking at what I've typed above it. So because it sees the letter T, it's assuming I want to type Tony Hollowitz. But if I want Tony Hollowitz in there, I can just hit the enter key and it will fill in the rest. If I want to type in Tom Harris, I just keep typing the name out as I normally would have and then hit enter. So you have the ability to make this a little bit of a simple task if some of the information in certain cells is information that you need to type over and over and over again. This isn't really a good example of that, but it might be something as simple as if the only options you're going to put in a cell are yes or no. You hit Y, yes goes in. You hit the letter N, no goes in. Now, I'm going to come up next to where it says Tony Hollowitz, and I'm going to click in this cell right here, which is cell B2. I want you to observe that my name, Tony Hollowitz, spills over into cell B2. Now, as I'm sitting here looking at this, I understand that what you're seeing on the screen might look a little small. I want you to observe that on the right-hand side we can see over just a little bit past column O. Down to the left we can see down about 31 rows. But one of the features in Excel is if you come over here to the right, there's what's called a zoom feature. And by clicking on this drop-down, I can zoom in on this information. For example, if I choose 200%, you're going to see everything on the screen just got bigger. Now that doesn't mean it's going to print out that size, but you can use the zoom feature to make things bigger or smaller so it's easier on your eyes when you're working with them. And it's a great feature for the purpose of this training. Now, I can also, let's say I didn't want 200%, let's say I needed 500%. That wasn't an option there. But I can actually come right up here and type in 500, hit enter. Oh, I'm sorry, I can only go to 400. I'm going to type in 400. And you'll see everything will get very, very big. Okay. Now I don't quite want it that big. I'm going to go back down to 200%. But the point I started to make before I showed you the zoom feature was the way Tony Hollowitz spills over into cell B2. Tony Hollowitz is not in cell B2. It is in cell A2. And I know that by clicking on it, it's right there. When a cell has something typed in it, and there's nothing to the right of it, it will allow that information to spill over into the next cell. But the minute I type something like my phone number in cell B2 and hit enter, now what you're seeing is my name is hidden, it's blocked, it's been typed over. Honestly, all the information is there, you just can't see it. If I come up here between the columns A and B, and I put my pointer on this little line right here and click and hold, I can drag column A wider. So now we see all my information. A little trick is sometimes if you have a lot of information all the way down the column, you don't know what the widest name is. We might have a name there that's very wide. If you don't know how wide you should make this, you can come up here and instead of clicking and holding and dragging, you can just literally double click when you get the two-headed arrow. Double click and it will make this column as wide as the widest item. So now we have the phone number. I'm going to come here for Social Security number, and Social Security numbers are 9 digits. So I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Rate of pay, I'm going to type in 1025. And the zip, I'm going to type in my zip, 02474. And let me just show you a couple things, what's going on here. Okay, now I want you to observe a couple things that occurred here. When I typed in my zip code, the leading 0 disappeared. And that's okay. I'm going to show you how to resolve that. So now we have some just general, simple, basic information that I could go through and I could fill all of this in for Jim Smith. I could fill all of it in for Dave Howard and Tom Harris. But I want to talk to you about something. One of the things that you should do when using any software is before you ever sit down to do any work in it, you should ask yourself a question. That question should be, is this something I'm going to use over and over and over and over again? Because if it is, what you want to do is before you start entering a lot of information, make a template out of all the information. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all this information with the exception of the headings for just a moment. I'm going to click in this cell right here. I'm going to drag over to the left and up and hit delete. And I've deleted all that information. Again, if you want to select multiple cells, you click in the first cell and hold. You drag to the right, down, up, sideways, wherever you want to go. Now, what I would have done differently if I was going to use this over and over again is I would have done some formatting, which I'm going to show you in just a second. And then once I did the formatting, I would have saved this as a template. And I'll show you that a little bit more later. I don't want to get caught up in that, but knowing how to do templates in Excel or Word or different types of software can be a great tool to know about. So if you ever want to work with things over and over again, make a template so you can come back and use it repeatedly. Now, I'm going to come up on the toolbar and click undo to undo the deletion that I just did. If I want to redo it, I can click on the circular arrow up top. A lot of times I tell people if you ever make a mistake in Microsoft Excel, don't go in and try to fix the mistake. It's a lot easier to just click on undo or redo, because a lot of times by trying to fix it, you create other problems. So the undo and redo feature, which is also in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, is a great tool to use should you make a mistake. So now let's go back for a minute and do some formatting of this information. A lot of the things I'm going to show you, or some of the things I'm going to show you, are things you most likely know from Microsoft Word. For example, I'm going to click on the cell that has my name in it, or just the word name. I'm going to drag to the right and let go. I'm going to come up on the toolbar and I'm going to apply some formatting. I'm going to make these bold, I'm going to make them red, and I'm going to center them. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here where it has my phone number, and I'm going to click on that cell, and I'm going to go up and click on Format on the toolbar. I'm going to use Cells, and when I clicked on Cells, this box called Format Cells popped up. When I did this, I have a lot of options here on the left, and I'd urge you to go back in and look at some of these things in greater detail. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come up, and I'm going to choose Special right here. Now you wouldn't necessarily know this, but you just have to play around with it a little bit. Over here on the right hand side, I'm going to click phone number, and I'm going to go OK. So now what it did is it took my phone number and it formatted that number, those digits that I typed in, as a phone number. This time I'm going to go up and I'm going to click on column C. And at this point what I'm going to do is again go back up to Format, Cells, go back down to Special, and I'm going to choose Social Security number in this case and click OK. Put it in as a Social Security number. Now, I want to illustrate something and a little bit of a difference between what I did with column B and column C. When I did the formatting of the phone number, I clicked in this cell and went Format Cells. In a nutshell, what I did is just simply formatted this particular cell. So now if I come in and type in a phone number right here and hit enter, it doesn't format it because I only formatted this cell. I didn't format the entire column. Whereas the Social Security number, I formatted the entire column. So if I put in another Social Security number and hit enter, it formats it. And even if I went way down here and typed in a Social Security number, it formats it. So one of the things you want to do when working with a template is you want to think quite often, how do I want to format my stuff, and format it before you ever take the time to start entering data. Rate of pay, again I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go Format, Cells, and in this case I'm going to do currency because it's a dollar amount. How many decimal places do I want? Well, I want 2. And what symbol do I want? I want a dollar sign. I'm going to click OK. Puts in a dollar sign. The zip code, what happens is in Excel is because it was a number, the number 0 at the beginning, Excel looks at it as a number with a leading 0 and just simply removes that 0. So now what we're going to do is go back up to Format. We're going to go to Cells. And in this case, again under Special, I'm going to do Zip and OK. And it puts that back. So a little thinking in advance can make this whole process much easier. So now you'd go in, think about what your headings are going to be, think about what the items on the left would be, format it before you ever entered any of this data right here. You'd format everything in advance, save it as a template, and then you'd be able to use it weekly if, for example, this was a weekly report. Does anyone have any questions about any of the things I've gone over? Anything at all? Keep in mind you have to hit the 6 key to take the mute off, and you can also text me a message if you have any questions. Okay, fantastic. Now, the other thing, a couple other things I want to show you is how, once you're in a spreadsheet, to sort of move information around. I'm going to go back up and click on Undo a couple times to bring this data back. See this name Tom Harris right there? I'm going to click on that cell. And what I'm going to do is, let's assume that for whatever reason I want to take Tom Harris and I want to move Tom down to the cell that is A10 right here. Well, when I click on Tom Harris, I've got a box around his name. Excel's pointers make different shapes and styles as you move them around the screen. Right now it's not so much a pointer as it's a fat white plus sign. If I bring this up on this square, anywhere on the sides, I get a 4-headed arrow. It's skinny and black. If I click and hold the side, I can drag this down and put it anywhere I want to. So I come to the side, get a 4-headed arrow, and just drag. I can put Tom Harris anywhere I want. If I want to take multiple things, I can click on the first cell, drag over, down, and now I've selected a number of items, and I can actually drag these down as well. Okay. I'm going to come down and I'm going to click on Sheet 2. When I click on Sheet 2, I have a brand new sheet that's blank. It's only at 100%. That's why everything looks smaller. I'm going to come right here and I'm going to type in my name. I'm going to type in Tony again. I'm going to hit Enter. Now I'm going to come back up and click on this cell, and again I have the square around it. To make it easier to see, I'm going to use the zoom feature. I'm going to type in 150%. And I want you to observe on the right-hand bottom corner, there's a black little square. What that black little square does is it allows me to replicate what I have in this cell. So for example, if I come back up to this square, put my pointer on it, it goes from a fat little white plus sign to a skinny little plus sign. If I click and hold and drag down, I'm duplicating my name. Okay. I'm going to come up, I'm going to click undo, I'm going to click on undo again, and you'll see it even undid the size of the zoom. I'm going to click redo to go back a step. Now, I'm going to take out Tony by hitting delete. And I'm going to come back up to this cell, and I'm going to type in Monday. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to go type in Tuesday and hit enter. Now, the next obvious day is Wednesday. And that's pretty obvious because I've started a pattern, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But let me show you what you can do with Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel recognizes certain patterns. So if I click on Monday, drag down to Tuesday, and now grab that square on the bottom right and drag down, now we've replicated or kept that pattern going, the days of the week. Okay, so there's all kinds of little things you can do with Excel right at this point. Okay, you can duplicate months, days, and certain items that would be pretty common. Now, what I want to do next is I've shown you a bunch of little things you can do with Microsoft Excel. But what we're going to do is I'm going to give you one more example. Sometimes if you have to create a numbered list, instead of typing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, just create your pattern of 1, 2, and then drag down. And if I drag down literally off the bottom of the screen and just hold and just keep going, I'm creating a numbered list that is a lot quicker than if I sat there and tried to type it. So don't do numbered list within Microsoft Excel. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about any of the things I've done to this point? Okay, fantastic. What I'm working in right now is actually a Microsoft Excel template that I had created for this class. It's just got certain information in it that I use over and over again. When you open up a template, which I've done today, and then you go to save this workbook as something new, when I go up and click on File, Save, Microsoft Excel will take this information, or in this case I've got to do Save As, it will take this information and give me the option of how I want to save it. In this case I'm going to save it as a workbook, and I can give the workbook a name. So maybe it's staff info, and then I might put in today's date. So you can go in and work with templates and make them very easy to work with, and when you take a template and you save it, it gives it a unique name by taking that template and saving it as a workbook, so you can't overwrite it. Okay. Now, I'm going to click Save, and now I've saved this as a workbook called Staff Info. And you'll notice once I've saved it, up top, there is the name of this particular workbook. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to pause for approximately 90 seconds. I'm just going to review my notes. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to where it says Tony Stuff. Take a look at this for a couple seconds, because when I come back, we're going to take some of the things we've talked about today and apply it to a fairly simple spreadsheet. So some of the little things I've shown you, we're going to go in and apply some of these items to the things we've been doing. So I'm going to put you on hold for about 90 seconds. I'll be right back to you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me when I get back. Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions that I can answer? Any questions whatsoever? And again, you can always text me a message if you want. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, fantastic. What I want to do now is I want to create a scenario for you to give you an illustration of how you can use Microsoft Excel to keep track of certain information. What I want you to think about is that you are the local manager for the local Tony's Place restaurant. And this restaurant is just a pizza joint, and I hope you're not hungry, and I apologize if you are, and I'm mentioning all this good food, but Tony's Place is a pizza joint. And what they do is they keep all of their information about the things they sell for the week in an Excel spreadsheet. Now, as the local manager, you are going to be interviewed for a regional manager position, and the vice president is going to be coming in to interview you. They're going to give you your sales for 1 week, just a random week. This particular week happens to be in November, and they're going to say, listen, we want you to take this data, make it look a little bit better, and be able to talk about it when we sit down in your interview. So here we have this information, and it's all just very raw information. It's not very pretty. It doesn't look very good. Frankly, it's a little bit confusing. Down below here, we have some other information, which I'm just going to delete out for now because I don't want to take your attention away from that. I'm going to come up top, and I'm going to change this zoom to about 133% just to make it a little bit bigger on the screen, but not too big so we can't work with it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to click on Beer and drag down to Subs. I'm going to come up on our toolbar, the formatting toolbar, and I'm going to align all of this to the right. Again, a lot of these items are things that we've used in Microsoft Word, or hopefully you're familiar with in Microsoft Word. And if you're not, we're going to be offering Microsoft Word training that we'll let you know about. Now, I'm going to come up and I'm going to change the color of the type style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color to orange. Now what you're going to see is that's very bright, and it doesn't really show up real good against the white background. But now this little A here is how I format the font. Just to the right, the left, is what's called fill color. So I'm going to give it a fill color of something darker, like a navy blue. So now we have orange on blue, and that shows up a little bit better. I'm going to come up top, and I'm going to do the same thing to the items up here. Excel, as in Word, remembers the last two items you chose. So for example, because I chose dark blue before, the paint bucket remembers that. I just click on the paint bucket, don't even have to use the drop down, and it made the background or the fill dark blue. I'm going to click on the orange, and now it fills it in. This one, I'm now going to come over and change the type style. I'm going to change the type style to something different. I'm going to change it to autumn. I don't like that. That's sort of hard to see. So I'm going to come back here and do something like Arial Narrow. And now I'm going to center all this information. So now it's starting to look just a little bit better. Just a little bit better. But now we have a lot of information here, a lot of numbers information that we really need to clean up. Because of the way I developed this spreadsheet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this first item right here, 335, drag down and drag over, and I'm going to highlight or select all the numbers or figures within this spreadsheet. I don't really need to see all the dollars and cents. I just want to see the dollars. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I want to draw your attention up to the toolbar where it says increase decimal and decrease decimal. So for example, if I click on increase decimal, it changes it somewhat to how much information you see. Way too much information. I'm going to decrease the decimal down to nothing. So in other words, I just have round numbers. Now I'm going to take all this information and I'm going to center it so now it looks a little bit more presentable. What I want to also illustrate is that when you have a number, and I did this a little bit of an unusual way, so I'm going to change one of these numbers. See right here where it says 181? I'm going to type in 181.27, and I'm going to hit enter. Now what it does is it rounds that number to the closest number, the closest round number. In this case it's 181. But I want you to observe that when I click on this cell doesn't really contain 181. it really contains $181.27. And I know that because if I look up here on the formula bar, it shows me what is in that cell. If I want to edit information in a cell, I can just simply click on it, and I'm sorry, I misspoke. I can either click on it and type, so I could type in 96.02, or if I wanted to change that to 04, I can click on it and double click on it to get inside the information. I can also come up here on the formula bar and change it here. So if I wanted to change it to 06, I can put it there as well. So there's a couple different places you can change it. Also, what we want to do now is be able to talk about some of the results of these sales. In other words, the totals. So I want to draw your attention down here to where it says 276 right underneath it. This is where, in my opinion, Excel really starts to get sort of interesting. When I click on the cell below, I'm going to come up on the toolbar to an item called AutoSum. And when I click on the AutoSum, what it does is it takes the cells above the cell I had selected and puts some dancing black ants around it. What Excel is trying to anticipate is what cells it thinks I'm trying to add together. And because it sees all these numbers up top, it's assuming those are the cells I want to add together. Because that assumption is correct, I can just hit the Enter key, and now what will happen is when I hit the Enter key, it's going to take all these cells and add them up. And that came up with the total of $1,927. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in the cell to the right of 1927 and hold and drag all the way over to the right, go back up and click on AutoSum, and it adds all those above numbers together in the appropriate spot. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, drag over to the right, I'm going to center all of these, I'm going to put a background color, maybe we'll change it a little bit, let's make it a dark green, and maybe in this case we'll make it maybe like a yellow. So now this spreadsheet is starting to look a little bit better. At this point I just want to mention something that I try to tell people. It's something called the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule. Now if you're sitting there and you're looking at these colors and you're thinking, oh my God, those colors are just awful, well, keep in mind something. If you get this spreadsheet exactly the way you want it, and this is where you can waste a lot of time with software, if you go up, you get the type style just right, you get the colors just right, you get everything just perfect as you see it in your mind's eye, well, I guarantee you if you show this spreadsheet to 3 people, one person's going to love the look and feel, one person's going to hate it, and one person's indifferent. And I'm convinced that regardless of the amount of time and energy you put into something like this, there's some diminishing return on your end. In other words, regardless of what you do, at the end of the day, 1/3 of the people are going to love it, 1/3 are going to hate it, and 1/3 are indifferent. So don't get too caught up in some of the coloring and fonts and styles. Having said that, try not to use colors that just kill the eyes. You know, don't use fluorescent colors, obviously. Now, you're about to sit down with the regional manager, and you're being interviewed about this information. And one of the things that has the manager's attention right away is this figure right here of $1,927. And the reason the person is so curious about that is because of the fact that usually on Mondays, and keep in mind I said this spreadsheet is from Tony's Place a week in November. Now this particular Tony's Place is in Amherst, Massachusetts, out by UMass. UMass has tons of students. They're always eating pizza, and Mondays are typically one of your best days. Typically on Monday nights you do over $5,000 worth of business for Mondays. But this is only $1,927. So you're asked to explain yourself. How come your sales are so low? Now the regional manager is thinking a couple things here. They're thinking, well, you know what? Maybe they closed the store early. Maybe they're not working that hard. Or, God forbid, maybe someone stole some money. Now, the last thing's an awful thing. But you're being asked about this spreadsheet, and it happened a while ago, and you don't remember why it was only $1,927. You have no defense. But what you could have done is if I'd come to this cell and right-clicked on it, there's an option here called Insert Comment. And I'm going to click on that. A little box pops up. And the reason it has my name in it is because I'm the registered user of this Microsoft Office. Now, I could have typed in 5 o'clock, started snowing like crazy. Okay? And I'm just going to make a quick note. And I'm just going to put this in. 5 o'clock snow, closed at 8. Because it just started coming down like crazy. So I made a little note. I'm going to click on a cell away from that, and now I want you to observe that in that cell that has 1927, there is a little red diamond up in the top right-hand corner. All I have to do to observe my note is place my cursor back on that cell, and my note pops up. So if indeed this is what happened, well, you know what? All I had to do is make a note of it. One of the things that's great about Microsoft Excel is if you have a spreadsheet that you're going to end up discussing with other people, make some notes in the spreadsheet. Don't put it on a separate piece of paper, because then you can draw your attention to it easily as you're looking at the spreadsheet. One thing to be aware of is the fact that when you are putting comments in, let's say that this spreadsheet was a sales proposal, and maybe the quote you gave a client was because they were a mediocre client. And don't put that in a comment and say, the reason I gave them, maybe you got the okay from the sales manager to give them a certain rate, but don't put a note in there saying, hey, Fred the sales manager said we could give them this rate because they're a good customer, well, they're sort of a mediocre customer and he okayed this rate. If you put that comment in there to remind yourself and then turn around and email this spreadsheet to the client, well, the client can see the comments as well, so be careful with that. But comments are a great thing to use, and you can also put comments in Microsoft Word. But you know what? Let's say it didn't really snow. Let's say that actually you did steal the money, and now you're in trouble. Well, what you could have done is sort of taken the dog ate my homework defense and said, well, you know what? I lost the results for Monday. I don't know where they are. And you could have tried to play stupid. What you could have done is come up here and clicked on column C, right-clicked, and go hide. And what it does is it literally takes away column C. Now again, I want to draw your attention to this line right here. What it's telling me is that there's something hiding behind there. And by looking at that and observing that, what I want you to realize is that now our columns go A, B, D. If I want to bring C back, I can click on B and hold, drag over to D, and now what I've done is I've selected two columns. Everything I do with the columns work the same with the rows. In other words, I can select multiple rows. But now I'm going to right-click and go unhide, and it brings C back. Okay? So you can hide it or unhide it. Keep in mind my previous example with the human resources information. Obviously, you might want to keep track of people's social security numbers, different information, but if the office busybody comes wandering behind you and looks over your shoulder, you can see the person's name, social security number, address, all the private information. So if I was that human resources person, I would hide information so that people were just wandering by couldn't observe it on my monitor. Now, a few other little things I want to show you very quickly, and then I'm going to wrap it up and open up this class for questions. If you wanted to add a new product, for example, let's say you added chicken wings to your spreadsheet. Well, what you can do here is, let's say we wanted to put spreadsheets over about here. I'm going to click on row 7, and I'm going to right-click and go Insert. What it did is it inserted a row right above the row I had selected. If I click in this cell, B7, and type in wings, well, what happens is when I type in wings and then use the right arrow to go over here, I want you to observe something. This 1927 is actually not 1927. This is a formula that is equals the sum of C5, which is right here, all the way down to C13. This is an Excel formula that is telling this particular cell to add all these cells together to give you the result. When I add a new row, it assumes that I want to take the item or the number in this new row and add it to the total. So if I type in $10,000, for example, and hit enter, you're going to see this jumps up $10,000. Okay. Let's say I want to add multiple rows. If I click and hold on the left and drag down, and then right click and go insert, well, what happens is now I can add multiple rows within the spreadsheet. And again, if I put numbers in here, they will all add to the bottom line. Having said that, the last thing I want to show you is I'm going to go back to just a sort of an empty sheet, and I want to show you very briefly how to do a formula. This formula is going to be incredibly easy, and I'll show you how to cheat so you can remember how to do a formula. When you want to figure out how to do a formula, I'm going to do Control Home to get to the top of this spreadsheet. Type a number in a cell, like the number 1, hit enter, type the number 2, hit enter. Now, because we have two numbers in the third cell, I'm going to go up and click on Auto Sum, and then hit enter. This cell right here is the sum of these two cells, but it really isn't. If you draw your attention up here, you'll see that this formula in Excel is really starting with the equal sign, then the word sum, and then in parentheses, G3 to G4. So if you at any point in the future cannot remember how to do a formula, simply add two cells together, and then in that third cell where you added them together, go up and look what the actual formula is in the formula bar. And that is a great way to just remember the basics of doing a formula. The better you are at math and algebra, the easier it will be with formulas. At this point, I want to end our training. I went over a number of different little things that we'll expound upon when we do our Excel 2 training. I'll review this briefly in the next training, and then we'll add to this. As I end this training today, does anyone have any questions that I can answer? Any questions whatsoever? I'd be more than happy to stick around and try to answer those for you. Any questions? No? Okay. And again, if you're trying to ask a question, don't hesitate. Don't forget to unmute your phone by hitting the number 6. One last chance. Any questions? Anyone? Okay. Well, great. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, the best thing to do is if you're going to be taking the training in the future, the Excel 2 training, try to do things in it and then ask me questions after that class. That's probably the best way to do it. Okay. And if you ever need to get a hold of me, you can always, and if you forget my name or my company name, you can find me at TonyTheTeacher.com. Not Tony the Tiger, TonyTheTeacher.com. Yeah? And you can email me from there, and it has my phone number and all my contact information. Okay? Thank you so very much. I really appreciate the kind comments. Well, listen, I just want to thank you so very much for being here. And, again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to try to get in touch with me. Okay? Thank you very much. Have a great day. Have a great one. Bye now.